This topic feels familiar.
Flashback.
Once you tear off his first two arms, he attacks with his protecting arms. Real great move there, buddy!
End of flashback.
I think I've made good strides since then. If you're a longtime viewer of mine, you would have recalled that 8 years ago, oh man, where does the time go, I made a list of my favorite boss fights in video games. I think the video itself is still decent enough, and I feel it's where I've really started to establish my own style for making countdowns. But I also feel like I can do a lot better, so now I'm doing a new version of that list. Boss fights are often highlights of a game, and talking about them is incredibly fun. Standard rules apply, only one per franchise, and no final bosses. However, to make things extra interesting, I'm adding an extra stipulation. I cannot choose a boss that was on my previous list. So now it's time to talk about my favorite boss fights! Again, let's roll! When it comes to high adrenaline boss fights, Platinum Games has perfected it to an art form. Games like Mad World and Astral Chain have insanely fun boss fights that are super memorable. And to kick off this list, let's talk about Bayonetta. When it comes to picking a standout boss in this series, there's absolutely no shortage. The Alvaran from 2 and Rosa from 3 were definitely strong contenders here. However, I have a particular fondness for Sapentia from the first game. This gigantic draconic angel appears at the end of Chapter 13, and its appearance is a dead giveaway for how powerful it truly is. You fight this monstrosity on the water, fortunately not in the water, and you're tasked with attacking the heads on its body. Predictably though, it won't just let you. It'll attack with swipes from its body as well as launching projectiles, so you gotta be ready to dodge at any time. Occasionally, it'll dive under the water and do its best to recreate Jaws, so you best have your finger on the dodge button so you don't find out what the inside of an angel looks like. Once most of its health is gone, it creates a massive whirlpool and pulls Bayonetta in. At this point, you need to get up to its body while dodging the lasers from its tentacles before laying out the devastating finisher. Between the phenomenal atmosphere, unique style, and just the sheer energy of it all, this is without a doubt the standout fight from the Bayonetta series for me. And if it's just at number 15, then you know I got some superb bosses to talk about later. Cuphead is a non-stop barrage of charm. Between the art style, animations, and its wonderful soundtrack, it's a primo example of how an old style can still work really well in a new age. And of course, there are a ton of excellent boss fights to be had. Normally this would make choosing one pretty difficult, but this next choice was love at first battle. At the end of the last area, you come across a train and surprise, it's haunted! So now it's time to fight the Phantom Express. During the fight, you're riding a little train car and you can parry the dials on the left or right to adjust its position. However, little pumpkins are flying and they can drop projectiles to forcibly change it, so you gotta be alert while attacking. The first phase has you fight a ghost that launches eyeballs out of its hands. It's a pretty simple attack pattern, but that's just fine. In the second phase, you're facing a giant skeleton ready to pound you into dust. The trick here is to react to where his head is, because that's a safe zone and where to aim. Third is a pair of long-necked monsters that attack with lightning. The best way to tackle this one is to focus on the one attacking, so you can dodge and hit the other one. And finally, you make it to the head of the train that detaches and starts running. You gotta open its compartment and shoot the heart, but between its ring and fire attacks, that is far from easy. This fight has a great deal of variety to it, and like most bosses in Cuphead, each phase challenges you in a different way. What's also really cool are the mythological references at play here. All 4 pieces of the train are based off Japanese yokai. The ghost is Tanome, the skeleton is Gashidokuro, the long neck ones are Rokurakubi, and the head is Oburaguma. And as someone who adores world mythologies, that's an easy way into my heart. Out of all of Platinum's products, my favorite is easily the wonderful 101. It has its own unique style in conjunction with all the energy and hype I expect from the studio. When it comes to the boss fights, they're all large and in charge, and without a doubt highlights of the game. Shame I can't talk about Prince Vorkin again, but oh well, there's still plenty of great bosses to talk about. Like Wanna, a small alien who pilots a giant robot. Okay, not the most original of concepts, but hey, it works. After making her appearance, Wanna shows up the Daija, with the intent to absolutely annihilate Stratoport and the goddess statue it holds. Fortunately, the mysterious space cop Immorta shows up and launches a gigantic missile which the wonderful 100 probably makes use of to ram this thing. And after having a rocket shoved down its throat, the Daija shifts into its lethal form. And that's a pretty apt description because it's ready to kill everyone in the squad! First you gotta make it to the head, but it won't make it easy for you. It'll send burrowing enemies to try and take you down, but they're about as useful as a pack of worms. Eventually though, it'll shake you off and you gotta glide away from its chomping maw, and it is beyond tense. Once you get it to chomp its own body, it whips out buzzsaws. Large, herdy buzzsaws of death! This is easily the best part of the fight, dodging the huge saws and reflecting the energy disc before getting the opportunity to break the saws and slam Wanna right in the face! It is beyond satisfying to lay the beat down. And when the Daisha goes up in flames, you can see Wanna suffer a humiliating defeat as she tries and fails to kamikaze the statue. This game can be absolutely hilarious when it wants to be. This fight has a solid amount of variety to it, and the stormy aesthetic really adds to the ambience. And here's a fun fact you'll never believe. Wanna is voiced by Steve Bloom.
A handful of color-coded misfits wants to topple the combined might of our entire army? How droll. You dead the weights and the appendages of the magnificent Wanna!
Think about that for a minute. Rival battles are an art form. Taking on an opponent on equal ground to you is such a wonderful feeling. I originally planned to do a list of my favorite rival battles, but I had to scrap the idea because unfortunately I couldn't find enough good candidates. Having said that, there will be quite a few of them on this list. And starting off is this big rivalry in a small game. Throughout Bug Fables, the diva Monthifa and her right-hand Zast are constantly trying to one-up Team Snakemouth, with Monthifa wanting the glory of discovering treasure and defeating the Wasp for herself. You face off with them a few times, with it all coming to a head in the Termite Kingdom. After Zast takes out the Primal Weevil in one fell swoop, it's time to face him and Monthifa one last time. First off, the music in this fight is absolutely superb. It really communicates how Monthifa is a diva, but it's also her grand stand. Fitting for the scenario if you ask me. Zast is the main attacker, using stinger attacks and quick strikes, and capable of taunting and forcing one of the team to only be able to do basic attacks. Monthifa meanwhile attacks with her singing, either directly or by buffing Zast. Also, if you attack Monthifa, Zast doesn't take it too well and buffs himself. Admittedly, this fight is very easy once you get the strategy down, but I still love it. Not only is it a great conclusion to the ongoing rivalry, but the act of coming up with that strategy is actually super fun. You really have to think of who to attack and when, and what statuses will be best. Small they may be, this fight left a big impact on me. Kirby games are pure and simple fun. They're a textbook example of how a game doesn't need super deep mechanics or intricate stories to be well made. However, despite how simple the games are mechanically, the boss fights can get really creative. There was absolutely no shortage of bosses I could have chosen here. The DDD clones from Robobot, Chlorine from Forgotten Land, or any of the Galactonite fights really could have been on here. However, I have a certain fondness for bosses that like to use your own strategies against you. When you finish Ripplestar in Kirby 64, you confront what you think is dark matter, and it reveals itself to be quite the colorful concoction. This is Miracle Matter, and this boss fight takes your usual approach and flips it on its head. Normally in a Kirby boss fight, you pick whichever ability suits you best. That idea won't work here at all. Miracle Matter is only vulnerable when it attacks, but the kicker is that it can only be harmed by attacks of the same type that it is using. So sure, you can absorb part of its attack for a copy ability to have a projectile to attack with, but this isn't ideal. The moment it switches forms, you'll have to ditch that ability to be able to attack with a different one. This makes Miracle Matter a rare case where going at it with no ability is honestly the correct choice, which is so cool. Of course, it won't make it easy for you. As mentioned, all the attacks are based off your copy abilities, and you'll need to be ready at all times to dodge and then be able to retaliate. From bubbles that explode, to fire geysers, to dropping rocks, this Chimera certainly has options. It's not a super challenging fight, but I love the creativity on display here. No other boss in the series uses copy abilities against you in this way, and that's what makes this fight super memorable. On top of that, the music for this fight is absolutely fantastic, easily one of the best boss themes in this series. If it isn't a miracle in the slightest, now this fight is so awesome. One Step from Eden has become one of my favorite indie games as of late. The way it seamlessly blends that roguelike style with the battle system of Mega Man Battle Network leads to a wholly unique experience that I come back to over and over again. A big part of what makes this game so fantastic is the array of boss fights. Each of the playable characters has their own unique style, and this is reflected in their own fights. Any of them could have made this list, but I gotta give the nod to the musician, Violet. On the surface of it, she seems to have the least going on. Her only attacks are Wave, which is always prefaced by giving you shield, summoning speakers, and a Ray attack. But it's everything around this fight that truly makes it greater than the sum of its parts. All of her attacks are dictated by the beat of her boss theme, which is phenomenal by the way, so this fight can quickly become something akin to a rhythm game. You can't just react to her, you need to be listening to the music to know when she's going to strike. On top of that, those speakers she summons can not only soak up damage, but they also impede your movement, so you'll need to multitask as well. While not the most intricate fight in the game, everything that goes into this fight between the attack power and sync to the music itself, and all kinds of strategies you need to use to win truly elevate it, making it easily my favorite fight in the game. It's a shame that I'm awful at actually using Violet though. Oh well, that means I can always fight her and enjoy this concert and fight duet. In the Mega Man X series, X and Zero are sworn allies, trusted partners, and great friends. They complement one another flawlessly both in character and in gameplay, and their dynamic is one of my favorite parts of the whole series. However, what happens when two best friends are forced to fight one another? Well, X5 just so happens to hold the answer. After traversing Sigma's fortress, narrowly escaping death traps, fighting familiar foes, and potentially picking up the ultimate armor or black armor for good measure, X and Zero run into one another. X believes Zero will become corrupted by the Maverick virus around them and urges Zero to retreat, but Zero has a score to settle with Sigma. And when words aren't enough to dissuade, they both decide they need to fight for their right to face Sigma. Questionable motives aside, I adore this fight. X and Zero are true equals, and this really comes to a head here. If you're facing Zero, he'll use his Z-Saber to fire off waves as well as his Buster to shoot energy shots. He can also dive right at you and use these Giga Crash, which is quite tricky to avoid, honestly. Fighting Zero is all about speed and taking advantage of any window you can. Rather fitting if you ask me. Conversely, X dons the ultimate armor, and he isn't afraid to use it to the fullest. He fires charge shots of various sizes, dashes around to try and ram you, and even attacks with weapons from the previous game. How he has access to them is beyond me, but it makes this fight all the more awesome. To win against X, you gotta react to him properly and work fast, or you'll be overwhelmed easily. No matter which side of conflict you're on, it's a high adrenaline showdown and easily one of the best Mega Man fights ever, full stop. This goes to show that the best of friends put out the best of fights. When it comes to a lot of indie games, they try to come up with something truly unique, something has never been seen before, or at least a new spin on something that has. Crosscode certainly falls into the former, and it's become a personal favorite of mine. And when it comes to the boss fights, they are a sight to behold. But when it comes to my favorite, it's an easy choice. When you arrive at the end of the 4th main dungeon, you see the son of the East you fought previously, and he tells you it's time to fight the Guardian of... yeah, I can't pronounce that. And that Guardian is a gigantic whale! When the fight starts, the whale will be launching wave-based attacks left, right, and center, and you gotta do your best to dodge while also laying in on the big guy. Once you manage to break its guard, the son of the East will start raining down shock attacks, but that's something you can use to your advantage. By baiting him to strike the metal stakes, you can cause even more damage to the whale, which is super satisfying. Once the first chunk of the whale's HP is gone, you gotta do the same with the sun, but he definitely won't make it easy. He's fast, and that shock damage adds up quick. After that, it's on to the second phase, where the whale gets a lot more aggressive, which makes dodging and attacking that much trickier. Once it's done this time, you'll have the opportunity to get on its back to attack the sun directly, and you can easily take him down. However, the Guardian won't be pleased about losing its partner, and it gets even faster and nastier. Alternatively, you can take out the Guardian first, in which case the sun unleashes its true power, gaining several new wave attacks to use. This fight as a whole is just so full of energy, and with 2 different ways to tackle it, it has a certain dynamic that few boss fights can truly replicate. And it is shocked to say that this fight truly blew me away. Because of my stipulation for this list, picking a boss to represent the Zelda series was honestly pretty tough. Galactos was always top dog for me, so picking a different boss definitely required a lot of thought. I could've gone with Twin Rova, or Goat, or Helmassar King, or one of many others. In the end though, I realized the sanest choice was the truly insane one. Throughout all of Twilight Princess, Zant is built up as this mysterious and ominous figure that seeks to cloak Hyrule and Twilight to rule over. But when you reach him at the end of the Palace of Shadow, he shows off his true colors. He goes into detail about how he was effectively an outcast before he met his god, and then he proceeds to just absolutely lose it! Then the fight starts, and it's about as unhinged as he is. This isn't an ordinary boss fight, far from it. This is a 6-phase gauntlet. First off, you're in the boss chamber of the Forest Temple. Zant is firing shots your way, and you need to bring him down with the Gale Boomerang in order to strike at him. After that, it's time for a sumo match, so the iron boots are now your best weapon. Once that's done, it's off to the depths of the Lakebed Temple, where several large Zant helmets emerge, and you gotta spot and reel in Zant with your claw shot. And then it's back to the Forest Temple, for some reason, where Zant is firing at you like a crazed lunatic, so you gotta knock him down and slash at him. Next is the Snow Peak Ruins, where Zant becomes a frickin' giant! Don't worry though, he has weak toes, and you can just slam them with a ball and chain. And finally, you're outside Hyrule Castle, and at this point, Zant has completely lost it! His sword attacks at this point have little rhyme or reason to him, so it's less of knowing what's coming and more of trying to react to whatever insane attack he tries next. This right here is a really cool case study for the kind of character Zant is. As the fight progresses through the different phases, you see him shift from calculated strategies to complete lunacy, all capped off by that final phase. It goes to show just how far the deep end Zant has gone by this point, and it's all super memorable. Truly not a boss fight to be in the dark about. Platinum Games excels at many things. Over-the-top action, thrilling music, and exhilarating gameplay loops. But one of the more underrated aspects to me is how well they can establish a rivalry. That feeling between two characters that's respect, resentment, and being evenly matched all at the same time. We see that on full display with Prince Lorcan in the Wonderful 101, but also with my number 6 spot. None other than Jetstream Sam. After taking down the smug Sundowner, Raiden has his sights set on the head honcho of Desperado. So after a long motorcycle ride through Colorado, he comes up to the man who both disarmed him and cut his eye out, and after a small conversation, they decide to have one last duel in the middle of nowhere. On the surface, this is probably the simplest fight on here. Sam doesn't attack with much more than basic sword combos and rush attacks, and uses his high speed to try and get the drop on you. Yeah, mechanically, there isn't a ton to this fight, but you gotta look closer. For a good portion of this journey, Raiden held a serious grudge against this guy. At any time, he could have just dropped everything just to hunt Sam down, and that could have been that. But he knew Sam would destroy him if he tried, so he needed to get stronger. And after all the trials and tribulations Raiden went through, he was ready to take on Sam, and Sam knows that and respects Raiden's drive. And when all was said and done, it was revealed that Sam was mostly human, which gave Raiden all the more reason to respect him in turn. This goes to show that even a boss fight with not much on the outside can hold a truly deep conflict on the inside. You guys know me, I never pass up the opportunity to talk about the last story. There's a ton to love about this game, but the boss lineup isn't exactly one of them. This game has to have the most hit or miss lineup of bosses I've ever seen in a game. For every Queen of the Abyss or General Astar, there's a Kraken and a Shade. But I'm not here to talk about the overall lineup, I'm here to talk about my favorite, other than Astar, obviously. Throughout the game, Jett is a major antagonist, and I just can't stand him. He's incredibly conceited and haughty, and doesn't care who he has to step on to get what he wants. Eventually, he is thrown in prison for being framed for General Astar's murder, but later, he's inadvertently freed during the Garak onslaught. He meets Zangarak and they strike a deal. Zangarak will give him a powerful weapon to be able to kill Zale. And when Jett fishes Zale out of the ocean, he sees his golden opportunity and their clash begins. This fight is actually mechanically similar to the fight with Astar, being a one-on-one sword duel. However, he doesn't exactly fight honorably. He uses massive leaps to try and get the drop on you, attacks right when you least expect it, and can even stab you to drain your health and add to his. And also similar to the fight with Astar, there's a ton of emotion and incredible ambience to this fight, but it's pretty much the polar opposite in tone. Instead of feeling triumphant, this is a feeling of utter despair. Jett has lost everything, and is completely set on killing who he believed robbed him of his life. And throughout the fight, you see just how far off the deep end this formal noble has gone, especially during the QuickTime events. And when all's said and done, he goes out saying he only wished to be happy. Even after everything he did, I couldn't help but feel a bit sorry for him. I still absolutely hate him, but at least he went out on a high note. In Pokemon games, you've always got at least one rival traveling the region with you. Sometimes they're just there, sometimes they're also great friends, and sometimes they're just amazing, no two ways around it. My favorite rivals all have a connecting thread though, not just being someone who's great at battling, but someone who enjoys the thrill of the Pokemon battle. And if you ask me, the best example of this comes from Scarlet and Violet. When you set out on your journey, Nemona sets off right beside you, and she couldn't be more pumped. She'll challenge you periodically throughout the Victory Road story quest, and is always encouraging you to better yourself. She has the drive to succeed and wants to make sure you have that same drive. I adored her character, easily making her one of my favorite rivals. And when you conquer all the gyms and the champion, Nemona wants to challenge you one last time where it all began in Mesagoza. Everyone gathers around for a battle to behold. Her team has a Lycanroc, which is quite adept at getting up Stealth Rock, Goodra, which is beyond resilient and has good coverage, Dunsparce, which is just kinda there if I'm being honest, Orthworm, which is somewhat awkward to face given it's a pure Steel type with a ground immunity, Palma, which hits fast and hard so you gotta be careful, and her trusted starter, which will always tear her right away. The sheer diversity and balance of her team structure is super cool to see, and that's what makes this battle a genuine challenge. And throughout it all, she has the energy and the enthusiasm that I know and love from her. Is she the best rival in the series? Maybe, but either way, she left quite the legacy behind. I hope you've seen why I adore rival battles throughout this list. It's a shame that I couldn't do a video on that topic, but at least I was able to talk about some of my favorites here. And to cap off this topic, I say we pay a visit to the Tales series. When it comes to boss fights in this series, there's no shortage of great ones. When I first talked about this topic, I waxed poetic about the fight with Ash and Abyss, and shamelessly ripped off Kyuji, and I still feel bad about that. Regardless, I've played way more Tales games since then, including Tales of Vesperia. And on that topic, let's talk about my new favorite fight in the series. Near the end of the journey, Yuri and Flynn decide to face off, not as cruel enemies, but as friends and rivals. These two were super close most of their lives as knights, and Yuri wants to make sure they're both ready for their final trial. Just like the fight with Jett and Sam earlier on this list, this is a one-on-one sword duel without a ton of frills or anything special on the surface. But like that fight, the devil is in the details. These two have traveled the world together, fighting off whatever evil forces they come across, and now their journey is nearing its end. They realize that where they're heading has no room for weakness or second guessing, so they need to be sure they're ready. But at the same time though, this is an extremely friendly competition between two best friends. They've been through a ton, and even though they're also rivals, they always punctuate that rivalry with a smile. That's the kind of rivalry I love best. Not a bitter one, but one where the two rivals respect one another as equals and as friends. And tying it all together is a fantastic music piece, Fury Sparks. Easily one of the best battle themes in the whole series. And if you've enjoyed the stellar remix of that stellar tune, you should go check out my buddy Plant. You're welcome, dude. At the top of my old list was a Kingdom Hearts boss. That series has some of the best bosses gaming has ever provided. And if you need any proof, I did a collab video with a good buddy of mine just on those bosses. When I made that old list, I had played Kingdom Hearts 2, but had yet to play Final Mix. And as a result, I can safely say that this next pick is my new favorite Kingdom Hearts boss, hands down. In Kingdom Hearts 2, Roxas appears as Sora's nobody. When Sora became heartless in the first game to save Kairi, he inadvertently created Roxas. Like many nobodies, Roxas takes a lot of his personality traits from Sora, such as his cheerful attitude and his desire to make new friends. However, due to being a nobody, he was forced into the organization under Xemnas. Eventually, he couldn't take it anymore and decided to leave, believing nobody would miss him. And pretty soon, he decides to take out Sora so he can stand on his own. When approaching Xemnas' castle, Roxas ambushes the group and singles out Sora for a one-on-one clash, and what a clash it is! Wielding Oathkeeper and Oblivion, Roxas comes at Sora with slash attacks, wheel strikes, and dashing all around to try and catch you by surprise. Once he finishes his combos, that's your opportunity to strike, but you gotta act fast. Occasionally, you'll see a reaction command prompt, and if you can do it successfully, you'll take his Keyblades for yourself, giving yourself a big temporary advantage. Halfway through the fight, Roxas will attack with a barrage of light spheres, and after this point, he adds lasers to all his combos, making dodging and retaliating much trickier. But soon enough, you take him down, and Sora sees the face of his attacker. Not only is this fight incredibly fun in its own right, but it also hits right in the feels. Roxas' motivation is quite the sad one, and this is further accentuated by the Other Promise, the song that plays during the fight. Unlike pretty much every other boss theme in the series, or heck, boss themes in general, it's very sad. Every part of Roxas' misery can be traced back to Sora, and you can feel that in this song. This fight nails just about everything perfectly, but there's one fight I like just a little bit more. And since I had so many great picks for this list, I'm gonna fire off some honorable mentions. The Phantom from Mario & Rabbids Kingdom Battle, Shadow from Sonic Generations, the Quackled Myroclaws from Pikmin 3, Quadraxis from Metroid Prime 2, and Theseus from Hades. I look for many things in a good boss fight. Good build-up, a satisfying fight, maybe a little bit of tension, and some fantastic music. My number one pick aces all those aspects, and then some. It's a fight that blew me away my first time, and still amazes me every time I face him. Standing tall atop this list is Shido. In Persona 5, Shido first makes himself seen after you defeat Kamoshida, and he's basically your inspiration to continue fighting as the Phantom Thieves. But he's much more of a key player than that. In actuality, he's the very reason you have a criminal record at all. As a congressman in Japan, he holds much power, but covets so much more. He uses money and influence to cause many accidents related to the metaverse around Japan, just to improve his public image. His ultimate goal is to become Prime Minister of Japan, but you and the Phantom Thieves won't ever let that come to pass. You fight through his palace like all the others prior, set up the flashiest calling card possible, which is basically a declaration of war, and you go to fight his shadow head on. When the fight starts, he creates a massive lion out of the bodies of his supporters. He attacks with powerful physical attacks, and physical attacks of your own won't get you very far, so you have to focus on magic. Once enough damage is dealt, he changes tactics. His lion gains giant wings and takes to the sky. Now he focuses on all kinds of magic, meaning the chances for him to score follow-ups greatly increases. You gotta really be on your game in order to keep him at bay, and use your strongest physical attacks for big damage. After he takes enough damage here, his conglomerate transforms into a pyramid, and now you gotta dish out damage fast. He'll attack with cannon fire, and trust me, that will sting if it hits. Once his mighty pyramid falls, he ditches his following masses and decides to fight you head on, basically pulling a Senator Armstrong. At this point, the vocals for the incredible boss theme Rivers in the Desert start, and Shido doesn't pull any punches. He has a wide variety of attacks and can buff himself with Heat Riser, so you gotta lay in with everything you've got. But when his health hits 0, he's still not done! He breaks his power limiters and gets even stronger! His attacks at this point are some of the strongest magic attacks in the game, and can even potentially one-shot an ally with Tyrant's Purge, or deal massive spread damage with Tyrant's Wave. And when his health gets low here, he blows away all your allies, leaving just you and him. This fight just got super personal, as you now have the chance you've been waiting for to take down the man who ruined your life. And landing that finishing blow is arguably the most satisfying moment I've ever felt in a video game. This one boss battle has everything I want. It's challenging, it's built up incredibly well, the tension is through the roof, the music is quite frankly godlike, and the satisfaction when all said and done is unlike anything I've ever felt. I can, without any hesitation whatsoever, say that Shido from Persona 5 Royal is my favorite boss fight in all of gaming, and anything gunning for that spot has a country-sized hurdle to overcome. I'm Arrow Dragon, and never forget that you can always seize your own destiny. And that's a wrap for my final video of 2023. This was a ton of fun to do, and I hope everyone watching enjoyed it. Once we're in 2024, I'll get to work talking about my favorite games I played this year. Also, be sure to check out my Twitch, where I do game streams a few times a week. Well, until next time, this is Arrow Dragon, signing out.